Pick up and deliver.
Oh, look, our favorite listener is already on. Good, good morning to another Wake Up and Deliver with me, Matthew Zorshitsky, and John. I can't say your last name. I don't know why. I have the harder last name.
Now that's hilarious because if two people see like our names in our profiles, I don't think that they're picking mine as the harder one to get right.
Right? McClymont? McClymont?
Yeah, McClymont. The craziest thing though is when I always get people that say stuff like McClaremont. I'm like, guys, like what? Who are you around that has that crafty of a name with letters that don't exist but have sounds? And then
Where's the B in debt? Tell me where the B is in debt.
yeah, well, no, you can have actually funny enough, I was telling my daughter last night, I was like, hey, what's a sneaky K word? And she was like trying to figure it out, and I was like, knife. She's like, but there's an end. And I'm like, yeah, some words are like that. But I've never seen where you would have multiples. So it's like there's no A, there's no I, there's no R in my name. So I don't know where people get these these letters sometimes and these sounds, but who knows? It is what it is.
Who knows? All right, we're going to start off like we always do at episode 17, where we're rolling right through with some brain coffee. And I was talking to Kat before this. She said she wished she had a coffee emoji to send up, but she doesn't. So there's a heart instead for us. So this morning's I had it ready, but I had to fix something. Our morning coffee. I think this one's good. I think it relates the best so far to what we do. And it goes, you cannot define a person on just one thing. You can't just forget all the wonderful things and good things that person has done because one thing didn't come off the way you thought it should come off. No?
It's not that I disagree per se. I think what ends up happening, and this is something that I think is super important in our industry when you think about like credibility, reliability, or your reputation, is that, you know, anything that anyone does is kind of like making small deposits into a bank, right? And, you know, I think that the difficult thing for most people to accept is that the deposits that you put in are very often a lot, and not necessarily in big amounts. But I think sometimes, depending on what ends up happening, the person on the other side, whether it's legitimate or not, has a big withdrawal, like a big hit to that credibility, a big hit to that bank account. So it doesn't necessarily change the fact that the person was doing a lot of great things before, but I think it can take a little bit of time or a lot of time to potentially rebuild, rebuild that bank account, so to speak.
Well, I equate it back to, hey, you know, you do a perfect delivery 100 times and you do one late delivery and all of a sudden the customer's like you screw up all the time. That's the where my mind went to it. But I see what you're saying too. Like, you know, you have build up a lot of credibility. You have 1,000 great little deliveries, but then you have one major F up. Do you therefore lose all your credibility? I don't think so.
Yeah. But... Well, it's not, I don't think it's that you lose it per se. I think it's just that it takes a hit, right? And I think, you know, what makes it really difficult in logistics is that there's a big disconnect from the people doing the work and the people paying for the work, i.e., you know, the service providers and the shippers, because, you know, logistics overall is simple. Like, it's easy to understand. And very often people infer that because it's simple and easy to understand that it's easy, and it's not. So, you know, that 99.9% that you'd been rolling with, or that 100% that you've been rolling with, really just becomes the base expectation. Right. And, you know, then what ends up happening is that all of the failures just stand out because it's like, well, I'm paying you to move that product. I'm paying you to warehouse my stuff. I'm paying you to do the pick and pack. I'm paying you for whatever, right? Like, that's the job. And I think that that's what's extremely difficult for people in our space.
I think we're going to do a perfect segue here for you. It's the same as people, or I would say trolls online, when they're making comments, and you see these comments all the time, and all of a sudden you start looking through that person's credibility, and you're like, this person, that's all they do. Like, the value of what they're saying, maybe that one time was proper, but the credibility is out if that's all they do all the time. And I think you have a story. I think you have a story for that one.
I do have a quick story this morning. It was funny. So I wake up this morning and I see some comment from someone in the UK on something I posted like a week ago about Amazon. Now, in all fairness, this person seems to work for Amazon, so they probably feel very um, right now they're enamored and aligned because obviously Amazon is paying their bills and supporting their lifestyle, which I obviously completely respect. But I had shared something about Andy Jassy's return to office mandate from Amazon, and I shared from my own history, sort of a decade of managing remote teams, that I don't prescribe personally to the fact that everybody has to be in the same place or always has to be in the same place to get the highest levels of innovation or performance or whatever it is. And look, you've seen enough of my stuff and you experienced some of my texts and stuff. I make typos and stuff all the time. And sometimes I catch it. And for the amount of stuff we write, like I don't. But the funny thing was this person was like immediately trolling, being like, wow, like, can you actually put a little bit of effort, not just use AI and use a spell check, which I thought was funny in the first place, because if there's one thing that people complain about the AIs, it's most certainly not the spelling.
Yeah.
So anyways, I thought that was kind of funny, and I just kind of laughed, and I was like, dude, like you can check my profile. I write all the time. I do my own videos. There's enough mistakes in them to show that they're most certainly not AI. But thanks for coming out. But I found it really ironic in the sense that here's someone kind of, you know, taking a hard stance with my position, which I think is fine. I have no issue with that. But more specifically on something that's like a return to office, where the whole premise of this thing is, hey, better teamwork, more collaboration, closer community, tight knit feel with the team, blah, blah, blah. And, here's an example of someone that is going to be put back into that environment by going 5 days a week, that my only exposure to them and then looking at their comments and what they do here on the platform seems to be like a very toxic person. Someone that actually, when it's an in-person environment, does more damage to the team than when they're remote or something like that, just because of the amount of people that they could be around. Now, I appreciate that's like a wild judgment. I actually I know nothing about this person in person, but you have to at least wonder if someone is conducting themselves in a certain way online, how close it mimics the way they may be in person. So I just thought the irony of that was next level funny.
I find that I find it interesting that companies do or are forcing this back to the office kind of idea, especially places like Amazon. I keep getting
Oh,
kicked out.
Matt somehow dropped down. I don't know how you dropped down to not being a speaker. So hold on. So maybe Matt will come back hopefully in a second here. We'll see if he rejoins. Um, yeah, I think in logistics, especially when you're thinking about remote work, when you're thinking about teams, 100% there's tons of value on connecting, whether it's with customers, whether it's with teams in different areas. Oh, you're back.
Yeah,
But I'll finish my. Let me finish that thought. I'll finish because I think there's tons of value on being on site and doing all of these things. And the reality is there's tons of the work that we also do that doesn't really translate very well to remote work. But that being said, when you have people on your team that are managing different sites, they're managing different groups, they could be working in different countries, for example, with your customers, the fact that you believe that, oh, they can only be effective if they're sitting at this address, at this desk, and doing their Teams meetings or their emails or their whatever from that desk, I think is very flawed thinking.
yeah, and sorry I dropped that. I don't know why my LinkedIn this morning has been kicking me out consistently. So if I get kicked out again, I know John, you'll carry it. But I find it very. I think you miss out on a lot of talent. Like that's the biggest thing that everybody's looking for right
Mm-hmm.
now is talent, and then forcing people to go back into the office. I think you lose out on a lot of that talent, especially in logistics and supply chain, because one thing that COVID taught us is that we can be very far more flexible. Obviously, you can't work out of the warehouse remotely. There's certain positions that you can't do, but for the most part, like flexibility of a lot of these logistics companies have made it that they can work from home, get paid a little bit less, and get better talent doing it, and they can be remote, on the beach of Hawaii if they wanted to. And same as
Yeah,
working
yeah.
for some of these Fortune 500 companies. If the quality of work is there, and then not only that, you get a lot of introverted people that then join these companies because they don't want to work in a giant office where they get lost in the noise and they don't know how to raise their hand. And I think you miss out on some of that good talent there. So that's why it always surprises me when everybody's like, "Oh, you have to come back to work," because I feel like it's a micromanaging piece, and I'm wondering if more logistics companies are going to start rolling this way, because there's already a few that do, and then the other ones that go the other way. Which ones are going to prevail? Which group will have the better talent in the end? Is what I'm
Well,
curious about.
yeah, and I think I shared this with you, or I was saying it with someone, but like honestly, my personal belief with a lot of this return to office type stuff is more because of the fact, and this speaks to your point about talent. It's created too much competition for some companies. Like, right, like if I'm the Amazons and the Googles, even Shopify at one point, like the big benefit was that we have great culture, we have great buildings, we have these campuses, we have all of these perks, and it kind of forced people to really align and really entrench themselves into the company, right? Like if you just moved and you uprooted your family, for example, or you just settled down, or you're just starting a family because you moved to Seattle for Amazon, or you moved to a particular place for Amazon, whatever it could be, you're not going to be as inclined, especially when the salary's good. You're not going to be as inclined to all of a sudden pick up and move to somewhere else for the next person and move somewhere else for the next person, because, there is that balance in what your work does with your life. And you would have to get paid a ton of money to continually make sacrifices. They're uprooting your family, pulling kids out of school, causing yourselves to maybe lose your social circles and all of these things. But when everyone was hiring remote, salary and benefits and equity and all of these things became a huge pressure, because now it's like I don't have the campus thing to offer. I don't have all of the perks. I don't have the environment. I don't necessarily have the same logo allegiance. So it probably made it harder to bring in top talent, and it probably made it easier to lose top talent. So I personally think that that's a big contributing factor why you see a lot of these large organizations doing it, because they based so much of working for them in the status that the employees got for being part of those orgs, being at those campuses, and being at those places.
Well, you've worked at a few places that obviously have a very different corporate culture. From your own perspective, do you feel that you have benefited being in the office at times, or would you have always been more productive working from home?
Oh no, no, wait, man. Like, I mean, even 100% being able to go on site and to be with the people and to have those personal interactions adds tons of value. So, whether you don't necessarily have to be there all the time, but to be there for those key meetings, to be there to have those conversations in the hallway, to have those sort of like, conversations over a lunch or something like that, it does add tons of value. And I do think that the best companies are going to be the ones that understand that there's a huge benefit to flexibility for their employees and for talent for being remote and to being flexible, while also supporting bringing people together, having very regular meetings, whether that's monthly or quarterly, for example. I think when you start getting to once or twice a year, it's probably not enough. But I definitely think you still need it, because look, at the end of the day, people are social creatures, right? We're social animals. And I think we just respond very differently to it. And it's extremely hard to replicate that and even get the same quality or opportunity when it's all virtual and remote, because unfortunately it pushes a lot of the conversations and a lot of the interactions to transactional and functional.
Yeah, you don't build those relationships with your colleagues and have that kind of synergy. But I did read one kind of interesting thing, that when people are at the office, the amount of work they actually get done in a day is far less than when they are at home. So their efficiency technically is a lot better. The problem is they get their work done in like 3 hours at home, and they're not going to be looking for other work. And that's where a lot of the people want people to go back, because they're like, hey, you can do this job in 3 hours. When you're in the office, I can give you other tasks and provide more. And so you can provide more value, but at the cost of your ability. And I think that's an interesting piece, because there was a story about a tech guy, a code writer or a software engineer, and he had like 3 or 4 jobs working from home because he realized he can do what he did in an 8 hour day in like 2 hours.
I've seen that guy.
And you've seen that guy. And then he ended up like grabbing like 4 jobs in total, full time, and he was getting them all complete because he got his tasks and his projects outlined the way every company wanted, and he delivered, right?
Yeah, I think that obviously just gets people upset, because then they're like, well, then clearly he should have, told me he was doing more. But I mean, I think that there's a really weird mix between, it's like, if you're, and this is actually something that you find in logistics, and probably one of the biggest mistakes people have when they're managing, especially frontline workers, whether it's warehouse workers, whether it's their drivers or whatever, is that they look at the people kind of just like tools. And for the high performers, or the ones that can perform at a much different standard than your average, even when that average is the acceptable average for the company and what they feel is fair for what they're offering, they feel slighted if that person can do what someone does in 8 hours, they can do in 4, or they can do in 3 or 6 or whatever it is. And they give them more work, which honestly becomes a massive disincentive, because it's like, okay, great, I can perform at my peak, or at my, near my optimal level of performance, and my reward for it is actually going to be more work than Bob, because Bob can't perform at my level, but we're going to get paid this, but we're going to get paid the same. So I really think that, and that's when I do the modeling for a lot of like sort of warehouse or delivery activity, for example, like when it's last mile, anything that's time and activity based, I always make sure to really reinforce this, and to kind of get ahead of that conversation and make sure that people understand that, like, guys, understand that right now our goal is to establish the average, and the average that we feel is acceptable for the business when it comes to revenue, quality of revenue, profitability, whatever you want to have it.
Yeah.
And understand that you're going to have people that are going to overperform in the same way that you're going to have people that underperform. And everybody will go at the underperformers because they want at least the standard, but you also have to be able to let the overperformers overperform without creating a penalty for them. Now, you can provide other opportunities and give them ways to maybe make more money with that time, but you most certainly can't just dole on the work and say, well, since you're better, I'm going to give you more. You've got to pick up the slack. It's the fastest way to just lose your motivation in your workforce from the people that can really deliver at high levels for you.
I'll give you a great story. When I worked for a transportation company back in the day, and I was doing city. City was my my job at the time. I was doing city dispatch, and we had like 40 or 50 trucks in the GTA that we were kind of planning and going through. And at the time, they were getting paid, I believe, hourly. And then we were switching. We're looking at doing it based on zone delivery. So it was when you deliver to X location, you get X dollars, and the more you do, the more you'll get paid. And they worked out a baseline, and they said, hey, this is the baseline everybody will get, which was very similar to what they were currently get. But the idea was to get motivation out of the drivers to do more. And most of the drivers, why does that keep kicking me?
I think we lost Matt again. I think you need to hit refresh on your browser. Clear the clear the cache.
I don't know why it keeps kicking me. Anyway, so I'll continue back to my story. The drivers eventually didn't like the idea. They're like, well, no, we like the hourly pay because we don't feel rushed, and then and ended up not being changed because there's such a backlash to it. Even though they were going to get paid the same baseline, it was to improve efficiency on other drivers that wanted to do more. Majority of the drivers were like, no, we don't want to work in that fashion. We just like to have it based on how we're doing it on the hourly.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation about what people want or whatever, and I think it's because that very often comes down to trust and not having the right level of transparency in the model. Like, even in my last role, I remember having conversations with people on the floor. And when it came to the way that routes were structured and service like schedules were done, they just were like up in arms about it, and they were making comments that weren't true. Like, I had someone legitimately come up to me and complain about it, not knowing that it was sort of me and the team that had done it, and made all kinds of like crazy statements. And I was like, Dale, that's not true. Like, that's not how it works. That's not what we consider, this and that. But that's because of the fact that the local team, it was a little bit out of their expertise. So they couldn't explain it well. So they weren't able to provide the right level of transparency and stuff like that. So that was an interesting takeaway for me during that project especially was to really push even the supervisors and push the managers more than I had in the past to make sure that they understood, because these were seasoned people, but when it came to really fundamentally changing the model, they were saying that they understood and they agreed, and for the most part if you would question them they would seem to get it enough, but they obviously weren't getting enough to be able to really take the challenges from their frontline staff. So that's always something that's really important too when you're thinking about all of the ways that you're explaining these different models, these changes, because if you know that it should be better or that it has more opportunity, what has people feeling resistant, right?
Well, even on that, even to that point, the selling of that idea, even though someone comprehends it, and when they sell it, it's like that broken telephone game. And I'm going to relate it back to sales now. That if you're a salesperson, you're approaching a new customer, and you have this fantastic idea how you can solve their challenge, and you go to a core, like a lower end, not a lower end, but like someone that's not the decision maker in the company that you're trying to sell the services, and they love it, but they only present 60% of the idea how they comprehend it to their manager, and the manager might might like it, and then he presents 60% of it to his boss, and then the director gets it 60. By the time he gets to the person who makes that decision, that idea is completely different from what you presented and might not get pushed through. That's why making sure that someone understands the complexity or the fundamentals truly all the way through is very important. That's why training and retraining and selling and kind of going through it a couple of times, I think makes a difference. That's why if you do one pitch and the person's like, I love it, like I think you got to do a couple more pitches and make sure you really drive it home, whether it's sales or training or managing people.
Yeah, I agree. And funny enough, let's use then the concept of like sales and sort of really explaining or understanding, kind of like talk a little bit about what we're starting to see, because we talked about it before we started, and I think we really got into it deeper a little bit last week. But, as an extension of what's going on with peak, right, or this kind of surge period of the year, there seems to be a lot of either misunderstanding going around or maybe lack of transparency. A lot of people making different kind of statements about the market. And, I think one thing that I shared with you and you had a bit of a, good take on was how much of what we're seeing when it comes to either like lower volumes or challenges people having, like people seem to think that, oh, people aren't picking this service, they're moving from service A to service B, whatever it may be, without acknowledging probably one of the more straightforward and logical assumptions is that in the current economy, it's not necessarily that people are losing business to competitors, but maybe that everybody's volume in terms of like what the shippers are doing because they're so focused on saving cost is just down.
Yeah, I think the overall system is surprised. The economy is surprised of where we're currently sitting at, and how much of that is actually lower than everybody was expecting. I keep harping, I keep saying it's going to be Q2 before the economy kind of picks back up, but a lot of it is going to be on a whole bunch of different factors that are in place. But I think the volume is down. I know Jason Miller. If you guys don't follow him on LinkedIn, he's very fantastic on providing some of those analytics. He's from the University of Michigan, and he talks a lot about that. How everybody's like, oh, look at the rebound. He's like, there is no rebound. This is just a supply chain bottleneck, and it's just a little blurb. It's not the economy has recovered, or this is not heading in the right direction. Just because inflation is down doesn't mean we're recovered and everybody's going to start buying again. There's a lot of problems and challenges that people have accumulated in the last little bit that they have to get through before I think the economy starts back up. And to your point, I don't think a lot of the people are switching companies. Rather, their volume is just down. They're not producing as much. There isn't as much going
Yeah.
on in the economy as there was, and everybody's just kind of grasping at straws, going, hey, this is it. This is the point where everything is rebounding. I don't think we're there. I think volume's still down for a large part. Also,
Oh,
to the
yeah.
point of just China manufacturing, not as much is coming from China as it once was, and we're kind of nearshoring, localizing, and or they're not buying as much either, right? We're a lot more conscious of where we buy things from than I think we were 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people are now kind of like, yeah, I can buy cheap stuff or I can get this, I can't get that or whatever, but it doesn't last. And I think more than anything else, it's just frivolous spending in general has gone out. Like I what I know, like, you saw it and we were talking about it before, but like the newsletter I did Sunday, I guess yesterday, on FedEx, right? And I went through why everyone is misinterpreting the results and kind of all the BS that some of these competitors, quote unquote competitors, are leaning into, and trying to say about FedEx, about people moving away and stuff. One thing I actually forgot, I I had all of this like little section I wanted to add in, and I kind of forgot to put it in, is that the biggest shift that we're seeing right now is this big move away from priority type services, and just picking slower and cheaper type services. That's like actually the number one thing that FedEx is getting killed on right now. They lost the equivalent of about 80,000 shipments a day,
Wow.
that was going through their priority, right? And that's insane. But there was a couple of things that they put there, is that that is typically stuff where it's documents and it's B2B packages. It's really time sensitive stuff. It's nowhere near the consumer level stuff that most people are competing on. But what's really kind of telling is that if FedEx is seeing that problem, everybody is seeing that problem, because losing 80,000 shipments a day, and this is the part that I forgot to mention in the newsletter, they haven't lost any major customer. Like, no one, like, outside of USPS, but they most certainly weren't the ones paying premium packages like that every day. They haven't lost any real customer. They didn't have a major hit. There wasn't some big whale of a customer that went to UPS or
It's
someone
just
else.
service
So
change.
it's just service change, and really down, because look, if you're a business today, just like everybody, what are things that you recommend? What are things that I recommend? People in the audience here that are listening, everybody is telling customers, analyze your spend, cut your spend, look for alternatives. And that's what you're seeing happening. Like, with all of the things like DocuSign and all Zoho Sign, all of these different things that you can have these days. How many people now are becoming very accepting of not having physical documents, for example. When it comes to B2B shipments, right? And in the industrial space in particular, that was a big segment for FedEx. Those companies now are probably realizing, hey guys, us shipping these parts around like crazy, ultra fast and overnight is costing us a ton. We're probably better off to move something in bulk, get some inventory at some of our different manufacturing sites, keep some stuff closer in the local market. I mean, I did the same thing in the cash and transit industry with handheld computers. I'm like, guys, I'm not shipping them all from Toronto anymore. This is absurd. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing is like a culmination of this, but because of the fact that FedEx is seeing it, it's so easy to see because they had so much of that business, and same with UPS, but it's going to affect everybody. Um,
I'm
and that's
curious.
stuff that people don't understand when they see these numbers, is that they're just trying to, like, this business has moved elsewhere. No, that business is disappeared because people have found alternative ways. They didn't move it to someone else. They just stopped doing it.
I'm curious because now that you said that, it kind of tickles my brain, because a lot of companies, and whether it's for FedEx or for UPS or Canada Post or United States Postal Service, they do the expedited run. So if it's down 80,000, everything is pushed back. Not everything is as expedited. I'm curious how much of that truck. Oh, fuck's sakes!
No, Matt was
I'm gonna have
curious.
that
I'm going to
recorded.
wait a minute to see if you can get back in and let me know what exactly was tickling his brain. Um, it is very interesting though to try to. Oh, you're back again. You're getting
I thought
faster with it.
I know. I'm sorry. So I'm curious how much of that truckload business is down as well for the expedited service, going from FedEx facility to FedEx facility. Because before it was, if for Toronto to Vancouver, you pick up on a Friday, you have to be there Monday morning. Very much expedited freight was moving quick. But if they're down 80,000, the amount of truckloads that aren't moving anymore is going to be crazy. And on a side
Well,
note,
but that's
you're going to have to
but
edit
that's
out
where
some
they
swear words.
but that's where they got killed, actually.
Yeah.
And that's where what really drove people to thinking that like FedEx is imploding, is that it wasn't their revenue per se that was the biggest problem. It was their profitability. Like their profitability is taking a huge hit, and that's because of the fact, I know, I'm sure that the guys here that are familiar with logistics know, and ladies, sorry, that was generic. I'm not like that, but anyways, okay. Um, they know that at some point we have to have a base cost. Like there's a base infrastructure cost if you want to be able to have these promises. And sometimes when that truck is going to be 40% full versus 90% full, you still need the truck if you're going to have the promise. And until you get rid of the promise, you still have all of this infrastructure. So their profitability taking a huge hit. But on the flip side, they also incurred a ton more money on purchase transportation. And I think it's exactly to that point because they're so off on their volume and mix. They've been buying more capacity from the market than they would have traditionally in the past. So, and that was more expensive for them. So there's a lot of different things going on that, FedEx does a lot of parcel, but they have their LTL, their freight, and all of that stuff. But I think it's more indicative of what everybody is seeing really broadly is that these cost saving initiatives, these optimization initiatives that everybody has been sharing with these clients, with these different shippers or whatever, is really starting to become apparent, which kind of brings us all the way back full circle to your point about, the market may just be what the market is right now because you've had people have to change their activity to kind of hold on to their revenue or profitability.
Yeah. And on that, we're at our half an hour mark, John. I'll leave you with this. You're gonna have some. We're gonna have some editing to do because I swore a lot in between being dropped. So we're gonna have.
I didn't hear it. Oh, maybe on your channel. Yeah, I'll watch your feed. I'll watch your feed.
So, what are your final thoughts for the week? What should we all be kind of being aware of that you think that we should keep an eye on this week?
You know what? It's funny. I was gonna say some stuff, but I really think your information and your data really needs to be so much more of the focus. I've got two different things going on this week. One where I'm going to be going on site to support someone and take a look at some of their activity. But data is wild. Like in terms of so many people are getting so much data, but it's also messy and dirty and not really working for them in the way that it should. Mm-hmm. And in a market that is becoming so tight and so much a game of inches, even more so than it ever was before. The quality of your information and what you can pull from that and the way that you can make it work for you is becoming ever more important.
Yep. I think data management and data clarity has been a theme that everybody should always keep an eye on, and understanding their data properly, I think is fundamental for any company, whether it's logistics or not. And I think that's becoming more and more important as we're training different models like AI and large language models to help us do things more efficiently.
Definitely. Well, let's get into the week.
Let's wake up and deliver. On
Wake
that
up
note,
and deliver for everybody daily.
cheers. Bye, everybody.
Bye.